Hey guys, I'm going to teach you all about interior angles of triangles. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to calculate the sum of interior angles in any given triangle and solve for missing measurements. So go ahead and get your binder, turn to the math section, let's go ahead and take some notes. Let's start out with a fact. We know that the sum of any three interior angles in any given triangle always adds up to be 180 degrees. Here's what that means. Sum means add. So we know that if we add any of the three interior, which means inside angles, in any given triangle, they'll always add up to be 180 degrees total. Now we can take out a protractor and measure any triangle's angles, and you will find that they all add up to be 180 degrees every single time. However, what we're going to start doing today is looking at a few proofs. A proof in geometry is just a bunch of facts and explanations on why something works in math and why this is a law or a theorem. We're going to look at our first proof, and we're actually going to use what we know about transversals and parallel lines to prove the triangle sum theorem, which is this. So what I just did is drew the transversal. We put two parallel lines on top of this triangle. I just cut it with this transversal. I extended that out. And now we can start seeing a relationship to figure out what angle 1 is. In the transversal, there are special relationships like in red, these two are corresponding angles. And then the one across from it, vertical angles, those are all congruent. So everything in red is equal to each other. And you'll notice that angle 1 and 62 degrees are both in red. That means that angle 1 is also 62 degrees, and that relationship is called alternate interior angles. Those two angles are congruent. We can do the same thing on the other side, looking at a transversal cutting through the parallel lines this way to determine the measure of angle 3. Can you look at this picture and tell me the measure of angle 3? You should be able to see that 35 degrees matches with angle 3. And it's for the same reason. Angle 3 and this 35 degree angle are alternate interior angles, just like the other ones were for angle 1. All right, the last fact to determine is the measure of angle 2. And I can tell you that looking at this yellow straight line, that there are 180 degrees in total in this straight line, just like there are 180 degrees in any given straight line. So if I have 62 and 35, and I'm trying to figure out what adds to that to make 180, I can determine that the measure of angle 2 is 83 degrees. Because all those in total had to add up to be 180 degrees. It's a straight line. So in conclusion, if we look at the three angles inside the triangle now, all this was to prove that the sum of those interior angles adds to be 180. Let's go ahead and try that. Add up 62, 83, and 35. You should get it because we just did it. It's 180. And we know that because straight lines and triangles have a lot in common. In total, all three of the angles in any given triangle add up to be 180 degrees, and we just proved it with that proof. So I'm not going to have you do this part. This is another proof just without the numbers that does that same thing. What I do want to look at is an example where I want you to now try this by yourself, solving for a missing angle in a triangle. And you can use what we know about those proofs with the transversals, or you can use what we know about the triangle sum theorem. This question is asking what the measure of angle 5 is, and it's giving you angle 2 and angle 3. And here I'll even give you angle 4. Angle 4 is the same as angle 2, because those are those alternate interior angles if that's the transversal. So using that, go ahead and tell me what is angle 5 and explain how you get your answer. Go ahead and pause now, try that, and press play when you're ready to check. All right, so you should have got 39, and here's how I'm going to show you how I did this, and it's going to help you with the next set of problems that we're going to do. I set up an equation, and when I set up an equation, I know I always can draw a line down the equals. That's going to separate my equation, and I'm going to look on this side. And on this side of the line, I see like terms. I can go ahead and combine the 48 and the 93. That's 141. Then I bring everything else down. And I'm looking at a one-step equation where I'm trying to figure out what the x is. If I want to know what x is, I'm going to do the opposite of the operation being done. So I need to get rid of that plus 141. How do you get rid of a positive 141? You need to take it away or subtract it. And if you do it to one side, you have to do it to the other side. So now I'm left with x equals 180 minus 141. Which was 39. So that's another way that you can do this, and you're going to start seeing this method of setting up and solving equations to do the next set of problems. So pay attention, because I'm going to do one, then we're going to do one together, and then you're going to do one all by yourself. We're going to use what we know about the sum of angles in a triangle to set up and solve an equation to find the measure of each missing angle. First of all, what do we know about the sum of the angles in a triangle? We should know that it adds up to be 180 degrees. That's the triangle sum theorem. So these three interior angles are going to add up to be 180 degrees. That will be the first part of my equation, and I'm going to go ahead and do that on a separate sheet, so you should do that on a separate piece of paper as well. Now we need to write out each angle. So let's start with this first one, 5x plus 5. So I just wrote that expression on the same line as the 180. The next angle I see is that 3x plus 5. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to write that angle out on the same line as the 180 and the 5x plus 5. However, I need something in between here. What is it about those three angles that go together to make 180? If they add to be 180, I need to put a plus sign in between those two. Let's go ahead and look at the last angle. The last angle I see is this red square box. What does that little box mean? That little square means it's 90 degrees. It's a right angle. So we need to go ahead and put that into our last part of the equation. What should I put down? Should be plus 90. All right, so this is my full equation. All three angles together add up to be 180 degrees. Now I can start solving. My first step is to separate my equation on the equal sign. It should be balanced the whole way down. Now I'm going to look for any like terms I can combine. I see I've got 5x's and 3x's. That is 8x's in total. Then I bring everything else down to the next line. And I look for anything else I can simplify or combine on this side of the line. I know 5 plus 5 is 10, plus 90 is 100. So I'll write down 100 underneath and I bring everything else down. At this point I have a two-step equation. And remember, my goal is to get rid of everything around the x using inverse operations. I need to get to the x. So I need to get rid of that positive 100. How do you get rid of a plus 100? You need to subtract 100. And if you do it to one side, you got to do it to the other. So on this side of the equation, that makes 0. It's gone now. Now we just have 8x over here. And on this side, 180 minus 100 is just 80. Now it's just a one-step equation. What times 8 equals 80? If you aren't sure, the last step is to divide both sides by that number next to x. Since it's being multiplied by 8, we need to divide both sides by 8 to figure out that x equals 10. All right, so since I did my work on a separate sheet, I went ahead and just wrote x equals 10 for the equation. Now I can use what I know about what x equals to solve for the missing angles, A, B, and C. Here's what I mean by that. Let's start with angle A. It's 5 times x plus 5. Well, I know what x equals. It's 10. 5 times 10 is 50. Plus 5 is 55. So angle A is 55 degrees. Using that, let's go ahead and have you try figuring out what angle C is. What is the measure of angle C? 3 times 10 is 30, plus 5 is 35. Measure of angle C is 35. And we know the measure of angle B is 90. Now there is a way to check your work on this. See if you can figure it out. It says at the beginning, use what you know about the sum of angles in a triangle to set up and solve the equation to find out the measure of each angle. How can we check at this point that we did our work correctly? The big takeaway today is that if you add up all three angles in any given triangle, you should add up to 180 degrees. All right, let's look at the next example together. We're going to start by setting up our equation. We need to see that this angle, and this angle add up to equal something. What number do all three angles add up to equal? Just like the last example, in any example, with the three interior angles of a triangle, they're going to add up to equal 180 degrees. Now let's finish writing our equation. This plus this plus this equals 180. Go ahead and practice setting up that equation. You're going to want to write that on the same line as your equals 180. Go ahead and try that now and press play when you're ready to check. All right, so this is the equation you should have set up. Now we just need to solve it. I'm always going to start by drawing a line down the equals to keep my equation balanced. Whatever I do to one side, I should do on the other. But before I start doing that, I can rewrite this simpler. So I'm going to simplify the left side of my equation by combining like terms. Do you see any like terms? You should see 13x plus 6x. And those are like terms because they both have that x attached to them. We can put those together to make 19x and then bring everything else down. Next, we want to continue to simplify by putting these numbers together. Go ahead and add these numbers together, keeping in mind that's a negative 3. You should get 66 and then bring everything else down. Now we're going to solve this two-step equation using inverse operations to find out what the x equals. What's our first step to solving this equation? We need to subtract 66 from both sides and then bring everything else down. What should the next line of the equation be? All right, we have 19x equals 114. Right now, we need to figure out what times 19 equals 114. So we can divide 19 by both sides, and we know what x equals now. X equals 6. To find out what each angle is, all we're going to do is substitute in 6 for the x in each one of these angles equations. So for example, looking at this expression, I have 13x minus 3. 13x means 13 times x, and 13 times 6 minus 3 gives me 75 degrees. Go ahead and do that for the last two angles and tell me what angle E and angle F equal. All right, I got my three angles. How can I check that I did my work right? If you add all three of those angles together, you would have a sum of 180 degrees. All right, using those two examples to guide you, go ahead and try this last one all by yourself. Pause the video now to do that and press play when you're ready to check. All right, here's my work shown to show how I got x equals 25. If G and I are 2 times x, that means each one of them is 50, which means angle H, I could do 4 times 25 minus 20 and plug it in there, or I could just realize since that makes 100 so far, I need 80 more degrees to make 180. Because just like all the other examples we did today, all of the three angles inside or interior in a triangle always add up to be 180 degrees. So I'll give you the option for the very last question today. You can either choose to do number 5, or you can summarize today's lesson in 1 to 2 sentences. Number 5 is a challenge problem, and the picture is not drawn for you. That's probably where I would start. All right, guys, that's it. If you made it to the end of this video, go ahead and put in the comments, what does the interior of your dream house look like? Today we learned about interior angles of triangles. So now you should be able to calculate the sum of interior angles in a triangle and solve for missing measurements. Now you should go ahead and go back to the calendar and complete any other assignments you have left for the day. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye.